Yeah. So it'll be like,
well, isn't this already?
Kind of, but it's gonna be like more. I mean, it'll be clearer too, like, because you won't need the projector. It'll just basically be like a big TV screen on the wall that works like a computer or that smart document. So he just knows that I use it enough that he figured I can have it. But so that'll be good technology for us. It takes a while to install it. So I think they'll install it on our long weekend coming up. All right, so let me. All right, so I want to talk about 21 and 22 up here. Just wanted to record it for those guys at home. Okay, so they tell us it goes through point negative 13.7 and there's a slope of 0. Well, first of all, negative 13.7 is kind of a pain because it's, I mean, if you're graphing it, it'd be way off our graph. And a slope of 0. Now this one I guess isn't terrible, probably for the y equals mx plus b, now that I think about it. So if I put this in, but maybe this will help us think about this a little bit. So if I put, this is my x, y, m. So y, m is 0, x is negative 13 plus b. 0 times negative 13 is just 0. So I find out my b is just 7. So then when I go to write this as an equation, I take my m and b, and I'm going to put that all together. So m is 0. Well, in this case, how can I write that in a more simple way? Yeah. Y equals 7, 0x. I don't really need to write that. 0 times anything is just 0. So this is just y equals 7. So I want you guys to think about what that line looks like, though. Because if we have a slope of 0, what does our line look like? Yeah, go ahead, Izzy. It's flat. It's 0 fun, remember? So we're thinking about our slope here. So if I go negative 13.7 here, or flat line at y equals 7. So hopefully that got you kind of thinking about this a little bit. And we hadn't talked about that since algebra. I know you learned about it in algebra. Either I taught it or you learned it from another teacher. That a y equals 7 line would be a flat line at 7. So cross the y-axis at 7 and just be a boring, flat, 0 fun line. Just thinking about slope due there. So I guess the reason why I want to talk about 21, as I was thinking it was more difficult than it is, that leads us into 22. So 22 then gives us a coordinate point of 3, negative 2, and an undefined slope. Now that is not a slope of 0. Undefined is not 0. Yeah, so I just saw Bella do it. Undefined, remember, is swear word, like we're sliding off the side of the building. Not good. So this is, you can't see well enough ahead, you fall off the side. So an undefined slope. So it's not a 0 slope. So we cannot say m is 0. I don't know how to put undefined in my equation, and I'm a math teacher. Like, I don't know what to do with that. So I have to think about what this maybe looks like. So if I have 3, negative 2, and an undefined slope, it would look like this. So knowing that, and knowing what we just talked about in the last problem, anyone have an idea of what that equation is going to be in that case? So this was y equals 7. It's a flat line. What do you think this one's going to be? And you probably know from the answer key, but so y equals is flat. X equals is going to be our vertical line. That means x is always going to be 3. So x equals 3 would be this equation. It's a vertical line at 3. So x equals negative 7 would be a vertical line at negative 7. whatever x equals, if it's just a single x, it's going to be a vertical line all the time. So that's something I didn't talk to you guys about yesterday, so I understand if you didn't get 22. 21 maybe was a little bit more doable, but we'll kind of bring those back up again in the next, and we'll keep using them this year, but in this next section as well. All right, questions at all other than those? All right, so hopefully last class you guys still have the notes that we were working on. So if you guys could get that note packet back out. We still need to finish the rest of the notes. Does anyone do that? So it's the 3-5 note. Oh my gosh, there's have it back here. 3-5 notes. So it's a stable packet. The back side is blank. I don't know if that helps. 3-5. This one thing. Oh, you got it. Work. 3-5. Somewhere in there. Got it. Good work, you guys. All right. So we're going to talk about some graphing here. So today we're doing more graphing. Like last class was all writing linear equations. Today we're going to do a bunch of graphing and also writing linear equations. So the first half here we're going to do some graphing. The second half we're going to talk about more about parallel and perpendicular lines. So we're kind of leaving off about halfway through yesterday, day 2. So we want to graph these lines. So we did a bunch of graphing yesterday, and I think that was kind of a good review and hopefully reminded you guys that you probably remembered how to graph better than maybe you thought you did. Or if graphing was hard the first time around, hopefully now that we're doing it a second time around, you'll do it again in Algebra 2, you'll do it again in pre-calculus. You're going to graph lines a lot in math classes. So with our graphing of our lines, we want to use y equals mx plus b. Reminding us b is where we begin on the y-axis. And then the n is how we move using rise over run. Now the issue is it's got to be in that form. So if it's not in y equals mx plus b, we have to get it into that form. So these first few problems here aren't written in the form we want. If you look at letter A, what's the issue? What's happening that we still need to get rid of? Yeah, Will?
Is that there's a 3?
Yeah, there's that 3 by the y. Our equation y equals mx plus b isn't 3y equals mx plus b. It's y equals, so we have to get rid of that 3. So how do we undo that? Yeah, we're just going to divide by 3. Now, when you divide by 3, you have to remember to divide every single part by 3. You can't just say, I'm going to divide the things that make sense. I have to divide everything. So all 3 parts get divided by 3. Now, you might look at that 5/3 and think you want to change it to a decimal. Don't. You don't want to change that to a decimal. Why is 5/3 okay? Yep. It's the slope. We actually don't mind a fraction for slope. If anything, it actually kind of helps. It's rise over run. You don't mind it at all. Don't change it to a decimal. It'll be more confusing that way. -6/3. -2, right? So now our equation is in that slope intercept form with that one step. So where are we going to begin here? We begin at Yeah, Bella. Begin at -2. And again, that's on the y-axis. So the vertical axis, we're going to begin at -2. And then we're going to find or use the slope to move from that point. So we're going to use 5/3 to move. Using the rise over the run. So from our -2, we're going to go up 5 and over 3. And we can do that a few times. And then we can even reverse it. All right, is that okay? All right. Now our next one's a little bit more work to get the y alone. There's going to be 2 steps to get y alone. So there's more going on there than just multiplying or dividing or adding or subtracting. So to get y alone, what do you guys want to do first? Yeah, Will, what do you think?
Subtract 3x.
Yeah, so you might be thinking you might want to multiply or divide, but we want to add or subtract first if we can. And so since 3x is being combined with the y, we want to get rid of that first. So we're going to subtract 3x. Now, when I write this, to make myself less confused, I'm going to put the 3x first because I want it to look like this. So I'm going to put the -3x before the 4. Notice there's still a negative in front of the y. We'll deal with that in a second. The negative y equals a -3x plus 4. So I chose that order intentionally so that it makes sense to me. And it makes sense to someone that maybe is not as comfortable with it. You don't have to do that, but I think it makes it a little bit easier. But I still want to get rid of this negative in front of the y. What do I need to do? All right, get rid of that negative. What do you guys think? How do I change that? I don't want it to be a negative. I want it to be a positive. What do I have to do then? What do you think? Anyone do that already? What'd you do? Yeah, so you can multiply everything or divide everything by a negative. So basically, she just changed all the signs. So either multiplying or dividing all by -1, or you can just say, I'm just going to change all the signs. I like showing just dividing, but she said multiplying, that works just fine. So y equals a negative over a negative is going to be a positive, 3x. A positive or a negative is going to be a -4. So now my equation's ready to graph. That y has to be positive. You can change all the signs at once. You don't even have to show that step. You can just change it. I'm fine with that as long as you're able to graph it. So we're going to begin now at -4 on the y-axis. And then we'll do our slope. Our slope is 3. If I want rise over run, so I'm going to do 3/1. Go up 3/1. Go down 3, back 1. There's our line. All right, our last two that we're graphing here, there's supposed to be 2 different equations, and we're just going to put them both on the same graph paper because they're both pretty like not very interesting graphs once you get them on the graph paper. So letter C, I want to get a variable alone here. So I only have a y to get alone. So I want to get our y alone. So what are we going to do? Subtract 5. So I get y equals -1. Now going back to our homework from last night and thinking about what we know about a y equals equation. Essentially, this is the same thing as that. So there is no x value. That means the slope is 0. The slope is missing from this equation. So that means it's 0 fun. It's a flat line, but it starts at -1. And it's just a flat, boring line here at -1 on the y-axis. So this is my y equals -1 equation. I had someone once tell me that, I think it was another math teacher that mentioned when students were confused about whether or not it was like vertical or horizontal, she had the y and she flipped it over. A little bit of a stretch with my y's. So it's a horizontal line. Anytime you just have y equals is horizontal. It's one way to think about it. I always think of it as the y is always -1. It doesn't change at all. There's no other options for it. So however you can get yourself to remember that y equals is just going to be a horizontal line. So it's different than up here when we have a y and an x in the same equation. And then our last one, letter D here that we need to graph. There's only an x in this equation, even though there's no equation that's like x equals y or mx plus b or something like that. We're still just going to get our x alone. So how do I get x alone here? Yeah, divide by 4. So I get x equals 5 is my equation. Now if y equals a number is horizontal, what's x equals going to be? Vertical. So, and the person who had taught me that other thing, she had said, this is kind of a little bit of a stretch here. Times I hear things that might help, you remember? Looks like there's a little v in there for vertical. I don't know. That one's a little bit of a stretch. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the x-axis, and then a vertical line there. So there's our. So I put those both on the same graph because they're not really all that complicated graphs once you know how to graph them. Just watch out for those vertical and horizontal lines. That's when there's a single variable only in the equation. Okay? All right, why don't you guys flip the page? We'll do a little bit more notes, and then we're going to do a Kahoot on writing equations, just like practicing from yesterday. Yeah. Oh, it's supposed to be +5. I don't know why I wrote a -5 there. All right, yeah, we're good. I put it in the right spot. I don't know what I was doing. Yes, thank you. Just throwing in extra negatives to make you confused. I don't know. Thanks for pointing that out. So yeah, it's in the right spot. Just, I don't know what I was writing. All right, so we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines again. We talked about this already, so hopefully this is not a big jump for us. We've already talked about this, but now we're going to write equations with parallel and perpendicular lines. So for parallel lines, remind me what we know about parallel lines, and maybe specifically their slope. What do you think, Bella? They have the same slope. Their slopes have to be the same. Now, one of the things that does have to be true for sure is that the y-intercept can't be the same. If they're parallel lines, they never touch. So their y-intercept can't be the same point. So we're going to have to find new y-intercepts. So they have the same slope, but they're going to have different y-intercepts. So otherwise, if they're the same y-intercept, that means that they actually are connected. They're actually the same line. And then remind me about perpendicular. Do you guys remember what that one was? You have to do the slope. Bella's answering all your questions today, guys. Yeah, go ahead. Reciprocal and one other thing. The sign. So opposite reciprocal, that's like the technical like words for it, and we'll write it in kind of layman's terms too. Opposite reciprocal slopes. So remember that means we change the sign and flip the fraction. Change the sign and flip the fraction. So we'll work on some, why don't we do the first example here and then we'll take a notes break here. So why don't we start with this first one here. We want to find the equation of the line that goes through 6, -2, but it's parallel to y equals 1/3 x plus 7. Now you can go ahead and graph that and try to draw it, but I also want you guys to be okay with the algebra part of it, that you'd be okay doing this without using a graph at all. So tell me what you guys know about our new equation, our line that's parallel to this one. We should know a few things. Yeah, Bella? What's that? The points it goes through. So we know x and y. So I can use that x and y. What else do I know? Yeah. The line that's parallel to. So based off of that line is parallel to, what can I take from that? What do you think? Is there anything I can take out of that equation that I know? Yeah, we can take the slope. Our slope should be the same as this one. Parallel is same slope. So if I have y equals mx plus b, I should already know my slope. What's my slope? 1/3. I already have my slope. So looking at an equation like this, I can just pull the pieces I need in order to write my new equation. Now their b, I don't want that. That's like extra information I don't want. So if it means you have to cross it out, ignore it, whatever, don't use their b. So I have m, I have x and y, and I'm going to find b. And we just did this yesterday. If we have those 3 pieces of information, we can find a new b. So I can put all this into my equation, y equals mx plus b. I can put x, y, and m to find b. Happens to be that this will work out nicely, which is good. So y is -2, m is 1/3, x is 6. What's 1/3 of 6, you guys? 2. So then I can move that 2 over to solve for my b. So now I found my new b for my equation that's parallel to that line that goes through 6, -2. Now again, you could have done this using graph paper, but also knowing how to do it algebraically is going to be really helpful here. So y equals mx plus b. So the final answer is we want to write it as an actual equation there. All right, questions? All right, so why don't we take a little notes break. We're going to do a Kahoot on writing linear equations like we did yesterday. So you probably want a whiteboard or scratch paper. The back side of your notes is all blank. So if you just want to do them on the back side of your notes, if you prefer a whiteboard because it's more fun or different or whatever, you can grab that. You're going to want some scratch paper. You might want your calculator out. I'm wrong, I don't be monkey. Reese is apparently a gambler over there.
I just invested stocks.
Yeah.
Stocks. Yeah.
Alright, we all in? You guys get that? Dude, I won that. I don't know. Alright. So guys, they're gonna be asking you guys to write linear equations, slope-intercept form. Just be really careful about the signs and stuff like that, because obviously some of the answers are kind of try to throw you and get you with the wrong one. Turn around this way. See that? Hopefully the sign a lot better. See that? That's a -4/5 and y-intercept of 0. I guess I'll just get out of the way. It's like an eye chart, sorry. They give you way too much time, so.
I'm reading my options.
And I bet there's a chance that this one you made a silly mistake.
Yes.
All right, so those of you guys who chose the first one, what are you missing?
Yes.
The X. You have to have the X there. It's so important. I know a bunch of you guys yesterday were doing that as well. So our equation, our slope, and then our y-intercept would be here.
Oh.
I know, now with all the pressure's on, if you're in the lead at the start. All right, you should be able to tell based off of like where it crosses, and then if it's uphill or downhill, or if it's steep or not steep. You shouldn't have to do like. Alright guys, so again, if you weren't able to count, you shouldn't have to on this, like really that much. So it crosses at 1. But then in terms of the slope, the options were the slope were either -5, which would mean a really steep slope, down 5 and over 1. A slope of -1/1 would be just down 1 over 1. This is clearly not just going down 1 over 1, it's going down 1 and over 5. So it's a more gradual line there. Maybe we can change this here.
Dang, bro.
All right, so y-intercept of 4 and a slope of 3. -3, sorry. Y-intercept of 4 and a slope of -3. Wait. Oh, no, right here. Yeah, they're kind of tricky about their order there.
No, I think I'm wrong.
All right, now too many of you guys fell for the order change there. When you walk, does your left arm swing with your right leg or left leg? So when your left arm goes, does it move when you move your right leg or your left leg?
I think I got it. Well, This doesn't make sense, because what if someone does it the other way?
I'll show you how ridiculous it looks when someone does it the other way.
I got it.
So if you do it the same arm, same leg, this is the way you walk.
That makes sense.
Do you ever ridiculousness?
What's that?
I just overheard that, like how ridiculous you are. It's all a freshman like it is.
That's like my track coach in high school used to be like, don't dork skip. Because every once in a while we got a kid that like skip like that. But he'd be like, you can't be dorks at the track meet.
Do you ever have that where you like start walking and forget which arm you swing?
Yeah, you're like.
And then you're just looking really goofy like.
That's how I walk. No one knows what it is. What happened?
Oh, to be
What?
No,
Did it wrong? No,
it's just he had to think. He was thinking. He thought it was like a more difficult question than it was. That's 1/4 on slope of -3. So this one requires some work, you guys. Sorry. 1/4 and a slope of -3. That's not working. Goes through 1/4 and a slope of -3. You need some work for this, probably.
I don't need this.
You have a minute and a half
I
still.
can think.
Grease gallery.
No, I didn't know. No.
You got it.
There's a lot of pressure being in the lead.
I don't have any questions. Why would you
Shoot. Yeah, I got it wrong. Yeah, I can. Still like 45 seconds if you're still cranking out numbers there. I'm gonna come back. Just tell me that. I'll come back. Like correct. I'm still the podium. Okay, so you're the podium. Usually it lets me right on here, but I don't know why it's being finicky. So in this case, the slope is -3. That's your m, and then your x and y is 1/4. So then I just wanted to show you guys this one. Just why is it not letting me write? So you have to multiply the 1 times the -3. That's -3, and then you have to move that over to the other side. So when you add that over to the other side, it becomes 7. Okay. I'm still on 40. I said top 5 and first. All right, so again, you have like a full 2 minutes to do this. Tori, can you speak? Did it completely die too? Now you plug yourself. Are you not So again, guys, use your x and y and your slope.
You need to calm down.
All right, good work, you guys. So again, your x and y, you have to multiply the x times the m and then move that back over. Huh? You added. I actually doubted myself when you were questioning me. I was like, maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, would have been, thank God she said something.
I just happened to look at like she wrote 3 times 4 is 7, and I was like, it's just you can't unsee it once you. It's not a trick question. It's just like obviously not. So across the top, it should be like going this way. Red should. I mean, half you guys have it on your masks, so like yeah. Sorry.
That's fun.
And I don't consider the blue a stripe, so the blue is
The blue's blue.
fine. Okay, so it goes through 2, 3 with a slope of 4. Goes through 2, 3 with a slope of 4.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. Don't pressure me. It's not happening.
Wait, was I? No, I'm not. I'm right. Okay, double this. So. Yeah. I'm not saying I heard it.
Positive.
No, it's not.
Isn't it?
If it goes away, I can always I can pause it.
For,
Yeah. I think I made these like my. You didn't notice my meme here, but you know, plotting the graph. My dad joke. Yeah, sorry.
I don't get it.
It's a mom joke. It is at
Oh
our
my
house.
gosh, I'm not moving.
Because I have the lame jokes at our house, and so now
yes, he's epic.
he's funnier than me. Alright, so guys, this time we have to find the slope, and then you also have to find the y-intercept. So remember the slope equation, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, so you have to find that slope first. So you have to use that slope formula.
Oh,
You should have enough time though still. So we kind of have to do everything here. You want to simplify your fraction.
don't even sit on my eyebrows.
Scissors.
I didn't say anything. Yeah, well, they're brand white.
They're great.
Okay.
They're great.
They're no, we have a tip. They work right now. Out. What did you get? Gray shoes? I'm gonna just turn brown.
Oh my goodness, you guys. Okay, we're all over the place. It's almost as like it's kind of nice and like
It's like not
staggered. So we have to first find the slope. Biggest thing is the slope has to be 2, and so those of you guys who have -2 for your slope, you guys are kind of out of the running already, because the slope had to be 2. And that comes from the fact that we do -4 minus 2 is a -6, over -1 minus 2 is a -3, 2 negatives make a positive. So that gives us our slope of 2. And then we have to pick one of the 2 points to plug in there. I would probably just use 2, the 2, 2. So it'll be 2 equals 2 times 2 plus b. 2 equals 4 plus b. So our b ends up being a -2. There's one more like that, I believe. Still waiting for somebody to get something wrong over there. So it goes to -1, 2, and 3, -6. Similar question. -1, 2, and 3, -6. Yeah, if your slope's not up there, something with that. But subtract the -1. So 3
Oh,
minus
it's
the
negative.
-1.
Oh, so it's.
So 3 minus the -1.
Oh.
No, 3
Oh.
minus.
Wait, no, that's not right. Oh. Wait. Oh. What? I don't know. There's
9 seconds left. You might make a good guess. I believe it is only 9.
I'm cracking the picture.
All right, so there was 2 right answers. The reason is you could write +0, or you don't have to write +0 at all. Now, really, in this case, once you figure out the slope, you could actually, I don't know why it's not going to be right on here. So -6 minus 2 is a -8. 3 minus a -1, a lot of you guys, or these guys up here, just because I happen to be up by them, 3 minus a -1 becomes 3 plus 1, so it ends up being 4. So -8 over 4 is a -2. So that already took us into these 2, and there's not really another option, so hopefully you realize the B was 0. But if you messed up something in the slope, that would do it. Our last one is our last riddle. Let's see how good you guys are. I can't remember what this one is, but hopefully it's something. Oh.
Whoa, that was really fast. Everyone answered really fast.
Well, it's
That is
not.
pretty simple.
It's
It was like
green.
14 as soon as I clicked it.
You notice how I did put the color on the color. It bothers me when they're not like that, like with the blue.
I
and
don't
the
like it
yellow.
when it's not my color. Then it gives people.
Oh no! Dude, I still placed. I said I was gonna be on the leaderboard. Not even.
All right. So Julia and Nolan, top 5, want to come up?
I didn't want to be.
Or top 5. Lauren, did you only lose because you ran out of battery?
Yeah.
You gotta come grab one. Poor guy, no batteries. He was on the leaderboard before he ran out of battery. Poor guy.
Ow, I just hit
What is getting?
That's embarrassing, not being on the leaderboard.
Oh,
I know, that's double negative.
I'm scared.
So guys, for homework tonight, we're gonna need graph paper. I'll pass out some graph paper to you guys while we're getting situated again. You guys can go back to notes. We just have like 3 more examples to do. So then you'll need graph paper for tonight. Need to get a little bit more here. Stop. Oh, okay, did I send enough back? Oh, you tried to send one. Too fancy. All right, so guys, let's finish up with our last few examples here. Okay, so now if you guys recall, we talked about parallel that have the same slope. It says it goes through -2, 5, and it's parallel to this equation. But what's the issue with this equation? Why is this not as easy as the last one? Yeah, we need that y all alone. We needed that slope intercept form. So in this problem, we have to do a little bit of work before we can start. We need to get it into y equals mx plus b. Otherwise, I might get my slope wrong, and I want to make sure my slope is correct. Now, some of you guys are really good at doing math in your head, and so maybe you can figure out the slope just by looking at it, and that's okay with me, as long as you don't make a mistake, and then I can't really help much with that at that point. So I'm going to do the math to figure out the slope. So what do you guys want to move? Get the y alone. Yeah, Bella? 5x. Let's subtract the 5x. Now again, when I write this, I'm going to write it in the same order they have it, the mx plus b. So I'm going to write a -5x plus 8. Now to get my y alone, I have to do what? Divide by 2. And so now we get our equation, which this is the line we want to be parallel to. So that was a whole lot of work just to get the slope. So if somebody, again, if some of you guys were like, I saw that was the slope like 5 minutes ago, why are you still talking about it? It's okay if you guys can do that as long as you're good at that math in your head. If you're not, you're going to probably have to write these steps out. So what are we going to use from this? What are we taking out of it? The slope. So we're going to steal their slope. Our slope is going to be the same. -5/2 is going to be our slope. And remember, we still have a point. All the rest of this isn't necessary. All that information now, we don't even need it. So I'm going to put this all together to find my b. So my y is 5. My m is -5/2. My x is -2. What's a -5/2 times a -2? Works out really nicely. Feel bad for you guys grabbing calculators. This should be something you can do in your head. What happens to the 2's? They cancel out. 2 divided by 2 is nothing. A negative times a negative is a positive. So I get 5 equals 5 plus b. You might already see it. B is just going to be 0. So finally, we have to rewrite our equation. You can write +0, or you can just leave the +0 off of there. So kind of like in our Kahoot, that was an option, was the +0 could be in there, or it doesn't have to be. So either have the 0 or don't. It doesn't really matter to me. Questions there with that? All right, so we're going to talk about perpendicular then. Bless you. The perpendicular. So now this time it tells us that it goes through 2, 0, but it's perpendicular to this line. So what's different about that? What do we need to do now? Yeah, Bella? Yeah, so we have to take their slope, which is 1/5, and we have to flip it and change the sign. So our new slope is, like she said, -5. I'm not going to use anything else about this. So don't even look at that again. Once you know the slope from it, we're going to ignore it. So our slope is flipped and the sign is changed. So -5 is our slope. We have our x and y, and we can find b then. So again, once you use their 1/5, don't touch it again. Don't bring it back into the problem. We want to just use it to get our slope. So we find out b is 10. So our new equation and then we'll finish up with that last problem. This last one, the equation's written in a different form. It's called point-slope form. You don't have to know that. Really, any form they write the equation in, as long as we get our y alone, we're good. So we have to figure out the slope of this line. So again, we want to figure out what the y equals mx plus b is, and then we'll do perpendicular. So how do I get that in y equals mx plus b? We got parentheses this time. What can we do? What are we going to do first? Distribute. Yeah, get rid of those parentheses. There's no parentheses in our y equals mx plus b, so let's get rid of them. Okay, that looks much better. And right away, you might already say, I know what the slope is, just because it's kind of obvious, but if you're not sure, you can move this 5 over. That doesn't really change the slope. Okay, so I have this equation, but again, all I'm using it for is to get my slope. So I'm taking the slope out of there and using our new slope. And what's that going to be? Perpendicular. It already is negative, I think, so we want it to be a positive 1/2. So our new slope is a positive 1/2. Once I have that, I don't want to use that information again. It's probably the biggest mistake I see with those is people bringing stuff still out of that first equation. So again, I have my x and y, and I'm going to find my new b. Works out pretty nicely. Half of -8 is -4. So my b ends up being 11. And again, we use our new equation, new slope, new b. Okay guys, real quick before I completely release you here, we still have a little, about 20 minutes. I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes to explain. So our homework is listed here. A bunch of them are graphing, so you should have enough graph paper there. If you'd rather use your own graph paper, that's the kind of graph paper I typically use on a test. So I figured it's just easy for you guys to see. I mean, all graph paper works the same, but one of the things, so again, we're testing on Friday. So for reviewing over the next couple of days, now tomorrow, we're gonna do one of those charts where we write down all the vocab words and kind of make sure we got the vocab for this chapter. And that'll give you a couple days to study that chart. But also tomorrow, I need to do like a baseline test with you guys to see where your algebra skills are. I mentioned it before. It's not graded, but I want to see where you're at so I know what I need to spend more time with. So there's going to be, it's part of my growth as a teacher, so some of your other classes are probably doing the same thing. So it's a test that, again, I don't grade, but I want to see your progress throughout the year. So I'm going to ask you to do your best. It's a multiple choice algebra test, essentially. That's tomorrow. I'm going to do that along with our chart. So just a heads up on that. I don't want to like spring that on you and have like a pop test, but again, it's not really graded. It's for me to see where you guys are at. So we're having a regular test Friday. Tomorrow's just that like kind of growth progress test. So we have about 20 minutes here. Homework is the part 2 that's due for tomorrow.